I was at the Hilton Hotel in downtown Albany, which is near the Capitol. It was 9 p.m. It was a Thursday, and I was there not as a guest, but to find my wife. She was there with her boyfriend. She didn't know I knew, but I did. I'd known for a while, and it bothered me every day. I had to do something. I thought long and hard about what to do. I put up with her affair for months, hoping it would end. It didn't. Diana kept seeing Darren Ranger while pretending to be a loyal wife. Our conversations about the future were just that, conversations. I wondered what I did wrong. Why did she turn to another man? Clearly, I wasn't enough for her anymore. I tried to let her have her fun, hoping she'd come back to me. But once she tasted life with other men, she wouldn't return after months with no change. I decided to end it. It took time to accept this. I worked long hours, often 18. I couldn't understand why she was looking for another man. Was I neglecting her? I didn't think so, but something was wrong. Why didn't she talk to me? If I wasn't meeting her needs, why didn't she just leave? Instead, she kept a boyfriend and lied, saying she loved me. Why not end it maturely? With a divorce, there are so many questions and not enough answers. I came up with a plan, not perfect, but one I could live with. I wasn't there to be violent. It wasn't worth it. I wouldn't punch her boyfriend. My lawyer warned against it. I'd end up in jail. No, I was there to end our relationship. I'm David Walters. I'm 31. I was born and raised in Albany. I'm an emergency room physician. I used to work at the main hospital. I have a mother, father, and brother nearby. I also have a wife. I recently took a leave of absence to recover from burnout. My own doctor advised it. I haven't told my wife because she doesn't care. I needed rest, especially after discovering her affair. My wife is Diane Walters Stapleton. She's 30 and works for a national bank. We live in a nice 2-bedroom apartment. We live in a bedroom apartment near the hospital. We don't have kids, which is a good thing. Diane is 5'8" with long brunette hair and is very attractive. She catches men's attention easily. We met at university in an English class. I liked her from the start and asked her out. We've been together ever since. After university, we lived together for almost 2 years. After I finished medical school, I avoided huge debts thanks to my parents' help. I worked hard every summer to earn money. My family is doing well. My father runs a successful construction business with over 100 employees. I work for him in the summers to pay for tuition. I know how hard work is now. I work 18-hour hospital shifts and I'm on call on my days off. I work 12-hour shifts in the hospital and I'm on call on my days off, but you don't care about that. You want to know what's happening at the Hilton with my wife. Well, it's about to unfold. I've known about her boyfriend for a while now. Why haven't I acted? It's a fair question. I went through stages of grieving my marriage before deciding at first that I was shocked that Diane was cheating. I thought we were a team with shared dreams and plans. We even talked about having kids. We even looked at houses in the suburbs. I opened a savings account for a down payment on baby expenses. My salary as an ER doctor was growing rapidly, and Diane earned well at the bank. We were financially stable with a bright future. I discovered Diane's affair by accident. A nurse from the ER saw her with Darren at a restaurant. Diane and Darren had been seeing each other for almost 2 years. When I found out, I was devastated. I watched them enter. I followed them to the elevators. They went to the 12th floor. I sat and reviewed my plan, knowing I needed to address this disrespect. I went to the front desk and asked to call Darren. His room number was Ranger. He owned a local business with a wife and 2 sons. He was having an affair with my wife, who was his loan officer. When I found out, I couldn't believe the extent of her infidelity. A nurse at work mentioned seeing Diane and Darren together. A few days later, I told Diane that Rhonda, the nurse who saw her at a restaurant with a friend, had said something to me. Diane's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. The following week, I talked to my father about what to do. He was shocked and disappointed. We came up with a basic plan to protect myself. I also spoke with my supervisor at the hospital. She agreed that I needed a vacation to deal with the situation. I even met with and I also spoke with my supervisor at the hospital, who agreed I needed a vacation to deal with the situation. My next step was to hire an investigative agency to find out what Diana was up to. They had a clear picture of her and Darren's activities within a week, including the hotels they frequented. A discreet bribe to a hotel clerk revealed that Darren had been renting a room almost weekly for the past 2 years, often with the same woman, Diana. Then I took out all the money I could from my bank account and got ready to deal with the situation. I figured that Diane would meet Darren after work, so I made sure I was on a long shift. As soon as she left, I packed my essentials, loaded my bike, and arranged for my dad to pick up my car later. I only took clothes, a toothbrush, rain gear, and an iPad with me, and I made sure my bike, a 2016 Honda Africa Twin, was ready for long-distance travel. I was planning to travel a fair distance, so I decided to avoid freeways and stay in small hotels and B&Bs. I mapped out a route through New England, Canada, and across the U.S., hoping this journey would help me move on before leaving. I had to deal with Diane and her affair. I approached the hotel desk and I asked the clerk to call Darren Ranger, and I took the phone. "May I speak to Diane Walters, please?" I asked. "There's no one here by that name," Darren replied, faltering. "Just tell her there's been a pass away in her family." "Tell her David Walters died today," I said firmly. I hung up and handed the phone back to the receptionist. The receptionist smiled and left the hotel. I waited on my motorcycle. Diana soon ran out, not seeing me, and got into a cab, likely heading to our apartment. I, on the other hand, was heading toward freedom. I needed to get home right away. I dressed quickly, ran to the elevator, and grabbed a cab. Once home, I rushed to our apartment, struggled with the key, and searched for David. He wasn't there. Catching my breath, I saw an envelope with my name on it. Inside there was a note and David's wedding ring. He knew I read the note. Diana thought I was dead. Our marriage has been dead for a long time. I took what I wanted. The rest is yours. I told the management company I'm no longer living here. You can decide whether to stay or move. Don't look for me. I'm taking a break from work and your affair with Darren. You're no longer interested in being married to me. Enjoy your life, David. My attorney will contact you soon with further information. What am I going to do now? I never thought David would. I found out about Darren. Our affair was just for fun. David worked so hard and we didn't have much in common. I was lonely and thought we could still be a normal family one day, but that's not going to happen now. Darren was charming and it was easy to get infatuated with him. I thought seeing him once or twice a week wouldn't affect my marriage. I tried calling David, but his number was disconnected. I called his parents. His father told me David had left and to go to hell. Looking around the apartment, I saw that most of David's things were gone. The closet was empty and a few books were missing. There were black garbage bags in the kitchen filled with items he left behind. I was pretty devastated, so I decided to visit his family the next day to get a better understanding of what I'd gotten into. I called his friends, but they hadn't seen him in weeks. No one answered at his brother's house. I was pretty frustrated, so I poured a glass of wine and sat at the table, staring at the note and wedding ring. I knew I had messed up big time and that fixing this would be painful. That first night, I didn't travel far, around 10 p.m. I saw my wife run out of the Hilton Hotel and into a cab. She thought I was working in the ER and would be there until tomorrow, which gave her plenty of time with her boyfriend before coming home. I started my bike, an Africa Twin with a 6-speed automatic transmission, perfect for long rides with minimal fatigue. The speed automatic transmission is perfect for long rides with minimal fatigue. I always make sure I'm careful when I ride and stay aware of my surroundings. I've seen too many accidents in the ER caused by reckless riding. I've even witnessed kids being homicidal because of their actions on motorcycles. My destination was close by, on the Holiday Inn Express east of the river. I was exhausted both physically and mentally, so I checked in eager for a meal and a hot hour and a good night's sleep. The hotel marked the end of my marriage and the start of my new adventure. I left the apartment early and drove to David's parents' house. I saw David's car in front of the garage and hoped he was there. Miriam, his mother, answered the door and immediately slammed it shut. I rang the doorbell repeatedly until John, David's father, answered. He demanded, "What do you want?" I said, "Please, John. I need to talk to David. Come out." I pleaded. "You're too late. He left Albany last night. I don't know where he is, and even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. John, I need to explain everything to him. We can work through this." I insisted. "You've had an affair and expect him to forgive you. Get off my doorstep," he said, slamming the door. I sat on the step, unsure what to do. I rang the doorbell again and begged John to tell David to call me, but he closed the door without another word and left. I found a letter from David's lawyer when I got to the apartment. It said that I'd been taken off his health insurance, that our financial assets had been divided, and that his life insurance beneficiaries were now his parents. The letter also said that any correspondence to David should go through his lawyer. This is because of New York law, which says that I can sue for divorce after a year of abandonment. I realized my marriage was over, so I spent the weekend trying to contact David's family, friends, and colleagues. I even went to the hospital. An ER nurse, Rhonda, said she had seen me with Darren and told David everything. She offered me a drink and shared what little she knew about Darren. She mentioned that everyone knew David wouldn't return to work for a while. I left knowing I had ruined my marriage and had to face the consequences. Newfoundland is a stunning province. The island has beautiful scenery and friendly people. I spent over a week exploring the Avalon Peninsula, enjoying the views, the locals, and the food. I saw a moose on the road but managed to avoid it. I'd been warned about the moose, so I only drove during the day in Petty Harbor. After visiting Cape Spear, I got a flat tire. 4 people offered to help, which was great. This never happens in Albany. The Canadian Auto Club Cabot set a truck to take my bike to a repair shop in St. John's while my bike was being fixed. I stayed at a small hotel in the city, which was a great place to rest, do laundry, and recharge. The hotel was clean and had a small bar and restaurant at the repair shop. I met Emma Pfizer, a German woman traveling across the country on a motorcycle. I was heading to Morocco on a motorcycle and we got talking about our travels. We agreed to have dinner at a restaurant called the Salty Cod and had a great time. The next morning I woke up with her beside me. She was stunning and I felt amazing for the first time in a long while. We spent the next day together discussing our travel plans. Emma had already traveled 40. She was planning to drive around the coast of Africa, which seemed more exciting than my own journey. I even called my parents to discuss changing my plans to go to Africa. They supported my decision, saying I should do what makes me happy. When I was a kid, my father used to say that fathers are where their children's dreams go to die. I didn't understand it until I grew up and realized it was a humorous yet sadly realistic saying. I didn't understand it until I grew up and realized it was a funny yet sadly realistic saying. I have an older brother, Paul, who works with our dad in a construction company. He's married with 3 kids, and his wife, Marcy, stays home to raise them. My parents adore her, and their kids are spoiled. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back to my plan. The next night, I asked Emma if she wanted company on her journey through Africa. I didn't know if she had a partner, but I thought I'd ask anyway. She smiled and said, "Are you saying you want to come to Africa?" I replied, "Yes, I think Africa might be more. It's more challenging than traveling around North America, but I'm up for it. I need a change of scenery and to move on from my old life." Emma pointed out that I'd have to get my motorcycle to Africa first. I called the store and made some quick arrangements. They said they could ship my bike the next morning if I signed the paperwork was sorted straight away, but there were still some logistics to take care of. 2 days later, I flew from St. John's to Toronto with Emma, then on to Paris, Lisbon, and finally Casablanca. When David said he wanted to join me on the African leg of my trip, I wanted to find out more about him. I called a friend in Berlin my friend's husband works for the German police. She asked him to check on David Walters from Albany, New York. She quickly confirmed that David was legitimate. He worked as an ER physician at Albany General Hospital and was on sabbatical for 3 to 6 months. He came from a prominent Albany family and was recently divorced after his wife he'd had an affair, graduated top of his medical school class, and had no children. I even received a picture of him to confirm it was the same David Walters. Knowing this, I felt good about traveling with David. Having a doctor along was reassuring in case of any medical issues. However, I also understood he was on a long solo trip after his wife betrayed him, and I'd ended a relationship myself after discovering my partner's infidelity, so I empathized with him. There are pluses to traveling alone, like going wherever and whenever you want, but it can be lonely. I've been on this journey for months and covered over 30. I'm planning to write a book about my experiences as a solo female motorcycle traveler, complete with photos, videos, and a detailed diary. A friend suggested I share some videos online, perhaps on YouTube. David has a lot to learn about long-distance motorcycle travel. I'm going to start with some advice on traveling by motorcycle. I called a store in Casablanca that has most of what he needs and knows where to get the rest. It will be interesting to travel with Dr. David. I hope to be a good guide. David's parents have made it clear they want nothing to do with me. They refuse to talk or tell me where David is. It's clear that our marriage is over, but I'm not sure if I should file for divorce first. What if he comes back wanting to repair our marriage? Could he trust me again after Darren ended things? I was afraid that his wife suspected the affair and might hire an investigator. I felt very lonely. He was also worried that David had informed his wife about us. My social life is almost non-existent. I'm going to start joining my colleagues again. I've been working from home on Fridays, but I need to get out and see people. It's been almost 2 months with no word from David. It's clear he wants to end things. What did I do so wrong? He was never there for me, always prioritizing the hospital. I needed him too. I love him, but our conflicting schedules left us with little time together. I have needs as well. Darren visited me at the bank yesterday. He thinks his wife is no longer suspicious and wants to resume our affair, suggesting we use my apartment to save on hotel bills. I need closeness soon or I'll go crazy. I would have liked David, but without him I might have to settle for Darren. Oh well, Casablanca is an amazing place, known as Al-Dakar al-Bida in Arabic. It's Morocco's main port on the North African Atlantic coast with a population of about 4 million. The city blends the old with the modern while we wait for our bikes to arrive. Emma and I stayed in an inexpensive hotel. We toured the city, bought gear, enjoyed local food, and learned about its history and culture. Due to bad weather, the ship was delayed by 2 days, so we stayed in Casablanca for 8 nights. Some of those nights were the best of my life, and the rest were just Morocco is a beautiful country, and so is Emma. The more I learn about her, the more I like her. She's not only physically attractive, but also intelligent, resourceful, and a great motorcycle rider. She has a lot of common sense and isn't afraid to use it. Emma taught me a lot about adventure riding. She has a long-term boyfriend, referred to as her common-law husband, but he left her for another woman and she's now living in Casablanca. I bought essential equipment, gasoline, oil, tools, extra LED headlights, a GPS system, top-quality riding gear, a sleeping bag, an inflatable pillow, and a small gas stove. We were planning to stay in a bed and breakfast, but we ended up eating local food. Adapting to the local diet was challenging at first, but I got through it with Emma's support. I received a letter from my attorney saying that Diane hadn't contacted me. I didn't care about her anymore, she was supposed to be having fun. Another man, pretending to care about me, ridiculous. After Casablanca, we rode to Marrakesh via El Jadida and El Edda. The indirect route offered a great ride and beautiful scenery. Emma, who speaks German, English, French, Spanish, and some Arabic, was invaluable. The journey to Marrakesh took 5 days and over the 300 kilometers journey was the best trip of my life. Marrakesh is a vibrant city with a rich history and a modern side. We decided to stay for 3 days to explore. We found an inexpensive hotel with secure parking for our bikes, including Emma's well-equipped BMW F800 GS. My Africa twin performed well, and we enjoyed every moment of our adventure. Morocco is a unique country with a distinct culture, language, terrain, food, and weather. Despite these differences, it has a familiar feel. People here have the same aspirations as people back home, to provide for their families, have food and shelter, and ensure a better life for their children. They also seek peace and security. However, not all countries in this region are the same. The continent has stable governments, which is great. Morocco is doing better than many other countries in the region. Traveling with Emma has been a great experience for her. She really enjoys adventure and challenges. Meanwhile, I'm learning to face my own fears of new places and environments. I grew up in a safe area of New York with a stable family and a cozy home. Not everyone has that luxury. My sabbatical has taught me that people everywhere rely on their families and friends and take pride in their homes, no matter how humble. Traveling is a learning experience, opening my eyes in ways I never imagined. Emma is a wonderful companion and lover, passionate, caring, and adventurous, yet full of common sense. I'm really excited about traveling with Emma and embracing a new way of life. I don't think I can go back to my old routine in Albany. I enjoy traveling with Dr. David in Africa. He's great company and always surprises me with what we find different about Africa and the U.S. He's always worked hard to do the right thing. Medical school, family, and marriage, but his wife let him down. She didn't support him in his profession or their shared choices. I don't know her and I don't want to take her husband, but it seems she did a good job of leaving him on his own. We've only been together a few weeks, but I can tell that if things continue as they are, if he comes back to work, it'll be tough to say goodbye. I've got a plan to complete my adventure and write a guidebook for women who want to travel the world on a motorcycle. I committed to this project before I started my journey and I'm determined to see it through. I don't think it'll be very profitable, but I enjoy it and I believe I'm pretty good at it. We're traveling from Marrakesh to Lyon, which is about 900 kilometers away. We're mostly going along the coast. The vast, dusty landscape is pretty breathtaking. As a novice, I have to respect the environment and stay alert. My American passport isn't as recognized here as an EU one. Border guards often wonder why an American is riding a motorcycle. In such remote areas, one customs officer asked why I left America. I pointed to Emma and he laughed, understanding immediately. On our way to Lyon, we camped for 2 nights far from the road to avoid thieves. The first night I hardly slept, but I was able to rest better the next morning. It made me feel a lot better. Gasoline, water, and food are our priorities, so we never pass a place to fuel up and restock. We always pay cash to avoid drawing attention. West Africa can be as dangerous as some parts of the U.S., so we stay aware of our surroundings. Expensive motorcycles make us targets, and while my gear protects me from falls, it's no match for weapons. I've seen too many pistol injuries in the ER. The journey through Western Sahara and Mauritania was unlike anything I've ever experienced. It was dry, dusty, brutal, and beautiful. We communicated via Bluetooth helmets with Emma, sharing fascinating insights about the region. I was really drawn in by the silence. It was a bit daunting at first, but it was also really interesting. After leaving Lyon, our goal was Darar, Senegal, which is about 800 kilometers away and took 4 days of intense driving in the heat and dust. Emma kept reminding me to drink water, and I emptied my 4-liter Camelback daily. Sometimes we had to stop to go to the bathroom, and once I tried to take a picture of Emma squatting, which led to a hilarious chase. Traveling through Western Sahara and Mauritania was repetitive and monotonous. There were wide open spaces with nothing around, so we carried extra fuel and had to use it a couple of times. My bike with a bigger engine consumed more gasoline than Emma's BMW, so I planned to get an extra one. We had a breakdown and spent 3 hours fixing the gas tank on the side of the road. We camped for 3 nights, and despite not showering, having sex with Emma was still amazing. We used a little water and soap to wash the essential parts and brush our teeth with a cup of water each. We crossed the Gambia River at Dama, avoiding the more complicated and costly Rosso crossing near Dama. St. Louis is a city divided into different parts, some on islands. The contrast between poverty and wealth was striking. We found an inexpensive hotel, Hotel de la Poste. Emma and I were able to rest after our desert crossing, thanks to secure bike parking and a nearby police presence. We enjoyed the hotel bed, food, pool, and laundry room, and I checked my emails. I saw updates from my family and my lawyer. Diane had written asking where I was and when I'd return to Albany. I'd already told my parents and attorney not to disclose my whereabouts. Diane hadn't started divorce proceedings yet, but I expected she would soon. She'd been having an affair for 2 years, so our marriage was over. If she didn't file for divorce, I would. I'm enjoying the best time of my life with Emma, though I don't know what the future holds for us. I met her by chance after 2 wonderful days at the hotel in St. Louis. We set out for Dar about 300 kilometers away, but our plans changed when we encountered an overturned bus. A family on a scooter with a propane tank had hit a pothole, causing the bus to swerve and crash. David immediately ran to help the injured family. He found the father pinned under the bus, the children bleeding and the mother unconscious with the propane tank underneath. David focused on the mother while I helped with the children and others checked on the father. We used our first aid kits, but the father needed more help than we could provide. The police arrived, but they didn't do much besides directing traffic. Finally, 2 ambulances arrived and the family was taken to the hospital. David and I sat by the road drinking water while he checked on the bus passengers. A police officer asked David why he was helping. When he learned that David was a doctor, the officer asked him to accompany them to the hospital to describe the family's injuries. We followed the police to a fairly basic hospital where David did an examination of the children's cuts despite its somewhat outdated appearance. The hospital was clean and tidy. David showed me how to assist him and we worked for hours. His skills and calmness under pressure were impressive. We stayed another 3 days in St. Louis with David, working over 30 hours straight at the hospital. People started to talk about the visiting doctor who was bringing many patients in. I went back to the hotel to rest and clean up when we finally left. We felt a bit sad knowing the people there wouldn't have regular access to medical help again. When we got back south, we had some new adventures planned, including a stop in Dar es Salaam, the capital of Tanzania. It's a city of about 4 million people, and it's really interesting to see how wealth and poverty coexist. You'll see expensive cars and shabby scooters sharing the streets, but people are focused on just getting by, like anywhere else. My experiences had opened my eyes, perhaps thanks to Diane's infidelity, which made me realize there's a whole world out there to see every day. I was getting to know Emma better, and I decided we should stay at a beach hotel for a treat. I paid my usual share, and I could tell that Emma was short on cash, so I covered it this time. After St. Louis, we had 3 great days off, relaxing on the beach. Emma said that traveling with me made her happy, and I told her she was giving me a new lease on life. When I checked my email, I saw that the chief administrator at Albany General Hospital had written to David, "We hope you enjoyed your leave and are ready to return. We agreed on 3 months with a possible extension to 6, but you must return by the 1st of next month due to a code dash due to a worker's illness. The emergency room needs you back. Please call me when you get this. We really need you." Well, all good things come to an end. I decided to ignore the email for a few days and continue the trip, so that's what I did. The journey south was going to be tough and more dangerous, especially since David had to return to the U.S. for work. We discussed me going back to Germany, but decided to ride further south to Namibia from Windhoek to Cape Town. We arranged to ship our bikes from Dar and took a memorable trip. We took a flight to Windhoek on an old plane with young pilots. The weather was windy, but we were glad to land and see our bikes. The trip to Cape Town took 5 days. We made the most of it, enjoying the time we had together. We had fantastic sex with David and fell in love. However, I needed to return to work, start writing my book and edit hours of video. The publisher was eager for progress and funds were running low. David and I flew to Frankfurt together, then parted ways. He flew to JFK in New York and I took on our last day. We took the train to Berlin. We returned our bikes, mine to storage and David's to the U.S. It was a sad day. David didn't want to go home at Frankfurt Airport. We were quiet. He kissed me and whispered that he loved me. I knew this wasn't the last time. I'd see him back in Albany. I was in the hotel lobby when my brother Paul called out to me. It was my second day back in the U.S. "Dave, you look good. Where have you been? What's going on with Diane?" It's a long story. Paul invited me to dinner and I agreed. It was time to get back to life at home. We had a quick chat, and then I headed to the hospital to see my boss. Paul called Marcy to tell her I was coming for dinner. On my way, I passed the building where Diane worked. Dr. Johnson, the hospital administrator, was happy to see me. She mentioned a letter from the Seneless government thanking me for my help in St. Louis. I explained the story about the family on the scooter, and she found it strange but appreciated my effort. The ambulance chief briefed me and put me on the schedule for 12. My brother's on the hour shift starting tomorrow. I'll be visiting him, eating, playing with his kids, and maybe having a few beers. I knew there'd be lots of questions, and I was ready. Marcy gave me a big hug when I walked in. "David, how are you? We've all missed you." "I'm fine, thanks." Marcy cut to the chase. "What happened between you and Diane? Why did you leave?" "Good to see you too, Marcy. A beer would be great if you have one." Paul, who'd expected this, fetched 3 beers. From the kitchen, where they were all waiting for me, I started to tell them what had been going on with me. Marcy was really quiet and didn't say anything. I even tried talking to Diana, but she wouldn't say anything. She just wanted information from me. So I spent the next half hour or so going over the last 5 months or so, talking about Diana's affair without going into the investigator's report. Over dinner and a few beers, I told them about my travels and about Emma, who was back in Berlin while I was back in Albany. I was looking for a place to stay until I got my divorce and future plans sorted. The trip with Emma opened my eyes. I couldn't go back to pretending to be happy at the hospital. Returning to Albany reminded me of my failed marriage and how easily Diane had left me. I didn't tell Paul and Marcy this, but thinking about Diane made me feel weak. She deceived me for so long. I decided I'd never let that happen again. I realized there are many good women in the world, honest women with integrity who would communicate openly. If Diane didn't want to be married, why didn't she just say so? We could have divorced and moved on, but she chose to lie. I took an Uber back to the hotel and got a good night's sleep. I needed to find a place to live. A colleague informed me that David was back in town. They had seen him and I tried calling his parents, but they just told me to mind my own business. I was desperate, so I decided to wait outside the emergency hospital entrance for 4 nights in a row. I was surprised by how busy it was with ambulances arriving constantly. I brought a book and on the second night, I needed to use the restroom, so I went inside. A security guard asked if I needed help and I asked about David. He said the doctors' names are withheld unless you have an appointment and directed me to the main entrance. I thanked him and left on the 4th night. I finally saw him. I saw David walking from the doctor's parking lot to the entrance. My heartbeat quickened, but I didn't call out to him. At least I knew he was back. My next step was to try to talk to him and convince him to come home. After a few days of searching, I found a nice furnished 1-bedroom apartment near the hospital. It had everything I needed, so I only had to buy linens, towels, and food. The building had underground parking and security, although no doorman. I quickly got back to work in the emergency room, dealing with daily fire shoot sufferers, accidents, stabbings, heart attacks, and strokes. I noticed that Americans have an obsession with obesity, which is not the case with Africans, who generally have better nutrition and maintain their health due to scarce medical care. All these emergency cases and their insurance payments funded my salary. 2 weeks after returning to Albany, I met with my attorney to discuss my divorce from Diane. There wasn't much property or money to divide, so I told her Diane could keep everything in our shared department. Leanne had already prepared the divorce petition, and I told her to proceed. I was surprised Diane hadn't initiated the divorce, assuming she wanted to move back at my apartment. I realized I needed a hobby outside of work. My motorcycle wouldn't arrive for a few months, so I decided to look for another one. After researching online, I visited 2 local KTM stores and settled on the 890 Adventure R. I added accessories for long-distance riding. I decided to go for a distance ride, as it was suitable for both paved and dirt roads. It wasn't cheap, but I had no other plans for spending my money. Here's a quick guide to divorce in New York State. You can file for a no-fault divorce if you and your spouse have lived together for at least a year or if the marriage has broken down for at least 6 months. If you and your spouse have lived together for at least a year or if the marriage has broken down irretrievably for at least 6 months, you can get a fault divorce. My attorney emailed me saying Diane had been served with divorce papers. Leanne expected to hear from Diane's attorney within a week. If Diane stalls, Leanne would file a petition with the court and it would be granted after a year. If Diane's affair counts as an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage, it would be granted after a year. The lack of living together for the last 6 months means we would need to live apart for another 6 months to meet the requirements. Either way, the divorce would be final in about 6 months. Simple and easy. Then my doorbell rang. I arrived home to find a man in a suit standing outside. As I approached, he checked his phone and asked, "Diane Walters?" "Yes," I replied. He handed me a large envelope. "You have been served," he said before I could react. He took a picture. I was holding the envelope when I saw him. He quickly walked to his car. I muttered to myself, I knew this was coming. I did something I probably shouldn't have. I followed David after his shift 2 days ago to find out where he lived. It was just a few blocks from our old apartment. I took a few days to gather the courage to approach him. I dressed in an outfit he liked, skinny jeans, high heels, and a white sleeveless blouse with my hair in a ponytail. I bought it. I grabbed his favorite IPA beer and a bottle of California Chardonnay for myself. After a deep breath, I pressed the call button for his apartment. After a few rings, he answered. "Hi, David, is that you?" I asked. "Who's this?" he responded. "It's me, Diane. Your wife." There was silence for a moment. "Can I come up?" I pleaded. There was more silence. "I'd like to talk to you," I said. After what felt like an eternity, the buzzer sounded. I entered and took the elevator to his floor. With unsteady legs, I knocked on his door. I was surprised when the intercom buzzed. There are always people coming to apartments, whether selling cookies, salvation, or votes. But this was unexpected. I let her in when I heard the knock on the door. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my thoughts in the few moments between her call and the knock. 100 questions and feelings ran through my head. I reminded myself that I had moved on and was in a better place now than 6 months ago. I opened the door, and there she was. She looked tired but okay. She was still my wife. I invited her in. "Hi, Diane, what brings you here tonight?" "I had a meeting tonight, so I grabbed a glass of Diet Coke and pointed to the table for us to sit down. I decided it was better to have this conversation at the table rather than pretending it was a casual chat in the living room. Now was as good a time as any to finalize our marriage, sign the papers, and let our lawyers handle the rest. That crazy woman tried to kiss me on her way out of my apartment. I want nothing to do with her now. She wants us to act like nothing happened. She wants us to act like nothing happened and be a couple again, even have kids. She's not right in the head, so that's not going to happen. The only thing left for me is for my lawyer to file for divorce so I can move on with my life. I took a long hot shower to wash the stink off me, and then I had a beer. David got straight to the point without any pleasantries. He looked more serious than I'd ever seen him. My stomach did a little flip as I started. You scared the hell out of me when you called the hotel and had Darren tell. David, you were right. I was shocked when I got home and found your note and wedding ring. I put his gold wedding ring on the table, and he just stared at it, not touching it. I tried talking to your family, but none of them wanted to speak to me. Your father told me to go to hell, and I guess I deserved it. Ever since you left, I've been in some kind of hell. I said, David, what did you expect me to do? I found out you were. David replied quickly, what did you expect me to do? I found out you were. I didn't know what to say. I've been having fun with Darren for a while now, and you thought I wouldn't do anything about it. What kind of idiot do you take me for? Never mind, I know what kind of idiot you think I am. It wasn't like that. I protested. How was it? He demanded. I was lonely. You were always at the hospital. Never home. And when you were exhausted. You never had time for me. I explained that it was okay to have fun with another man. I also explained that it was okay to ignore our marriage. Why couldn't you at least talk? David stared at the table, refusing to look at me. He took a drink and then asked, Did you sign the divorce papers? No, I replied. I don't want a divorce. I want us to be a family again. I am still your wife and want to be your wife and the mother of your children. David laughed. You've got to be kidding. Are you completely delusional? No, I replied. I still love you very much. I want us to be together again. You're delusional. I'm not going to be your husband a day longer than I have to be. My lawyer is ready to file the divorce without you. Our marriage is over thanks to you. You started it by cheating, and I'm just finishing it. He said, What does it take to get over a divorce and become a couple again? I pleaded, I don't want to be married to you, Diane. We're going our separate ways. I've had an amazing experience since leaving Albany. And I'm not going back to my old life, he said firmly. David, we can be good together. I know it. I argued, no, we can't. You enjoy spreading your legs too much for other men. This water is poisoned. It's over. You can go back to doing what you like. David said, standing up. I finished my wine. I stood up and moved toward him to kiss him, hoping he'd remember what it felt like to be with me. I took his hand and pulled him to me and kissed him on the lips. He pulled away after a. Secondly, don't forget to take this with you, he said, pointing to his wedding ring on the table. I took it, put it in my bag, and left his apartment. That's when I realized we were done. David was over. He and I would never have a life together. I loved him and had cast him aside for something not worth the price. Darren wasn't a prize. He got what he wanted, and it cost me a husband. I didn't want to lose. I was so stupid. I deserved what I got. I need to sign the papers, and I've been really busy in Berlin editing loads of video and adding context. The dubbing has been tricky as I'm doing it in both English and German. Closed captioning is fun but a lot of work. The past month has flown by. I've sent David a few emails with short videos and pictures from his Honda in Africa. He looks good in the videos, even in the one where he threw his motorcycle. We both laughed a lot. I've also asked my friend whose husband works for the government to check on David before we travel to Africa to ensure he was who he said he was. Thankfully he was. I've also asked Ingrid to have her husband Nick update me on David. I needed to know what was going on without asking David directly. Nick found that David is back working in the ER and his lawyer has filed for divorce. I asked my friend whose husband works for the government to check on David before we traveled to Africa to ensure he was who he said he was. Thankfully, she found out he was recently. I also asked her to have her husband Nick update me on David. I needed to know what was going on without asking David directly. Nick found that David is back working in the ER and his lawyer has filed for divorce. The divorce papers were filed a few weeks ago, so it'll be official soon. That's good because I have important news for him, but before I tell him I need to take care of some things in America. I sincerely hope my news will please him. I need to tell David the news, but I'm not going to do it when he's still mad at his ex-wife. I need him to focus on me, maybe a little more time, but not much more time. Great news! I'm divorced, and it's official today. I have the paper in my hand. Thank God, now I can move on and do the things I want to do. I need to figure out a few things first. Emma calls and writes often about her book and videos. She sends videos mostly of me doing stupid things like throwing my bike or almost running into cows because I wasn't paying attention. We both laughed a lot. I told her about my life. I also mentioned Diane's visit, hoping for forgiveness and reconciliation. The disrespect Diane showed was the final straw for me. Learning about her affair sealed my decision. There was no going back. Emma listened to my rant and then said she had to go but would email me soon. She mentioned she had an announcement for me in a couple of weeks, but I'd have to wait. I figured it was about her book. A week after the divorce, I'm at Albany Airport, ready to fly to Berlin via Chicago and London. It's a 15-hour trip, so I'll arrive around noon. I need to see Emma. It's been almost 2 months. I need to know if there's anything left between us. If not, I'll figure out my next steps. I'm thinking of going with Doctors Without Borders. I landed in Berlin, went through customs, picked up my bag, and took a cab to the Parkview Hotel in Alexanderplatz. After checking in, showering, and eating, I set out to find Emma's office using Google Maps. I walked to her building and arrived around 4 o'clock. I'm here at 4 o'clock. If she didn't want to see me, I'd play tourist until my flight home. As it happened, her office was only a 15-minute walk away. I found her company's office in the lobby directory and took the elevator up to reception. A young woman greeted me in German. I asked to see Emma. She looked surprised and made a call, saying that either Emma or someone else would be there shortly. She gestured to some leather chairs for me to wait while I waited. She made another call, speaking quietly and quickly in German. I caught her eye a few times, and a few women passing by also looked me over. I felt like I was being scrutinized. Finally, another attractive woman approached me. Dr. Walters, yes, follow me please. I realized I had introduced myself as David Walters, not Dr. Walters. They knew more about me than I thought. We walked through sleek glass and steel offices, and many women glanced my way. I discreetly checked my fly. It was zipped. I wondered if there had been an announcement about me in the office after what felt like a long walk. I saw Emma coming around the corner, smiling. She ran to me, hugged me tightly, and kissed me on the lips. People were watching. Goodness, David, she said, when did you get to Berlin? I went to the hotel to clean up before coming here. I didn't want to look like a vagrant. I replied that I'd rather not risk getting thrown out by security. Emma took my hand and we headed to her editing room, where she wanted to show me her work on the videos from our travels. Emma was dressed in a long black skirt and a white blouse, quite different from the motorcycle gear I was used to. She looked beautiful, but my best memories were of her undress. I decided to go with the flow and see how things went over. We spent the next few hours talking about her book and videos. Some would be on YouTube, and most would be on the publisher's website with a subscription. Do you have time for dinner? I'd like to know more about you beyond your book. How long can you stay? I can stay for a few days. My return flight is in 3 days, but I can. Just change it if you need to. What do you have in mind? I was wondering if she was asking me to stay longer or figuring out when to get rid of me. I was a bit cautious. I want you to meet my family. I've told them a lot about you and they are looking forward to meeting you. She said. I was surprised. Oh, I suppose I can do that, but first I need to eat and try a good German beer. I can meet you after work. No, you won't. I'm leaving with you now. It's been months since I've seen you, and I have important news. After your news, she said, as we walked out. People turned to watch us on the way back to my hotel. I asked where she lived. She said she had an apartment nearby. I briefly wondered if she had a husband. The last thing I wanted was to be the other man traveling in Africa. It made it easy to hide such things, but reality. When I got back to my hotel room, I realized I didn't know Emma as well as I should have done. We started kissing passionately, and soon our clothes were off and we were undressed on the bed. I got reacquainted with her touch and realized how much I had missed her. After the nightmare of my marriage, being with Emma made me feel human again. I didn't want it to end. It was almost 9. When we got up to shower and eat, we stayed at the hotel's restaurant, which had good food and beer. Emma ordered a Diet Coke, which was odd since she usually likes beer. I asked her why her family wants to meet me. I told them about you and our travels in Africa. They're eager to meet you since you're from the U.S. My parents have visited my aunt in Florida several times. She lives near Tampa, part of the year where it's nice, especially for her arthritis. Emma laughed. We can visit my parents tomorrow if you want, she said. It's a 6-hour train ride. It's a 6-hour train ride. Where do they live? I asked. They're in the South. My dad worked as an engineer at Volkswagen developing production systems. My mom is an accountant, but they're both retired now. I'll call them and let them know we're visiting. I pulled out the force papers and showed them to Emma. She looked them over and congratulated me. I told her it felt good, but it was inevitable. I found out she'd been with her boyfriend for almost 2 years. She didn't want to be with me, so I asked her what she wanted to do now. She had a motive. She was taking me to meet her family and evaluating me. I'm not sure how much longer I want to stay in Albany. The hospital will pay me well, but there's too much history. I need to explore more of the world. I'm going to stay in Albany for now. The hospital will pay me well, but there's too much history. I need to explore more of the world. You've given me the travel bug, I said with a grin. Emma smiled back. We spent the night in my hotel room. The next morning, we went to Emma's apartment so she could pack. After a few phone calls, we took a cab to the train station. I like European trains. They run on. We had a bit more time and less paranoid security than at airports. We found our seats and settled in when we arrived in M. We were met by a couple in their 60s. Emma looked a lot like her mother, with the same eyes and hair, but she had her father's smile. We found her father's Pat station wagon and drove to their house. Their house was old but in excellent condition with modern appliances. I told her dad, Carl, would have been proud of the work he'd done. Carl seemed pleased. I was offered a beer and Emma got drinks for everyone. We sat down and they immediately asked where I was from. I told them I was from Albany, New York, which is north of New York City, about 2.5 hours away. Carl said he'd heard of Albany. Emma returned with the drinks. She gave Carl a beer and I had red wine and she had water. We sat in the living room and as the silence got awkward under her parents' intense gazes, I started a conversation. The best way to engage people is to ask about themselves. Carl quickly began talking about Volkswagen and his work. Maria was more modest. She had worked for a large accounting firm for many years. She spent the majority of her career in auditing and retired when Carl did. They planned to travel, especially to warmer places. They wanted to buy a vacation home in Spain or Greece, somewhere warm in winter. Germany is too cold for them, so they deserve a break from the cold. They have friends who do the same, so they plan to find a place nearby. My parents bought a big van to see the country and spoil their grandchildren. I said they expected me to add to the number of grandchildren, but it didn't work out. Meanwhile, dinner was being prepared in the kitchen. Carl talked about German engineering and beer while Emma watched me closely. Emma got into motorcycling because of me. Carl proudly mentioned that he's owned motorcycles most of his life and still has a BMW 1200 for long-distance travel. Maria often rides with me on our trips. I'll show you my motorcycles tomorrow, but tonight let's enjoy dinner. I felt like I was being scrutinized, like in a job interview. I expected to get a separate bedroom from Emma's, but was surprised to find when we got into bed, there were fresh towels for both of us in the same room. I left my underwear on, which Emma thought was strange. She asked why, pointing at my boxers. She said it didn't feel right to get undressed in her parents' house. I replied that her parents and her sister have slept undressed all their lives. Lives, take it off. I want you close to me. I whispered. How long has it been, Emma? How long, exactly? How long have you been pregnant? How many weeks? You remember, right? I'm a doctor. I know what a pregnant woman looks like. You have a small bump, so maybe 3 3/4 months. Oh my God, I connected. The doc, I'm going to be a father. Emma smiled and pulled out a plastic test with 2 blue stripes. I saw a doctor in Berlin a month ago. I have an ultrasound appointment in a week. I was ready to move on as friends, not lovers, knowing what time and distance do to relationships, but part of me wanted to rekindle our connection. I got off the bed, grabbed something from my bag, and returned. I grabbed my bag and went back to my desk. I'd brought this just in case. I opened a small box and pulled out a ring. Her face lit up. Yes, 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 she said. I hugged her tightly, then remembered others would want to hear the news. I quickly dressed and found her parents in the hallway. We'll be right out, I said to Emma. She dressed, and we all went to the living room to share the news. Maria was already there. I knew my daughter was pregnant. Mothers always know. Carl wasn't upset to learn his daughter was marrying an American. What could I say? We got married in Berlin with Maria, Carl, a few friends, and some colleagues from the publishing house. About 30 people in total. When I showed up at the office, word spread quickly that the American Emma had talked about was there. Everyone wanted to see the doctor who rode a motorcycle. We made several decisions, including moving to Albany to be closer to my family and to give Maria and Carl a place to visit. I negotiated with the hospital for a shorter shift cycle and less pay to spend more time with my pregnant wife. The next few months were hectic. Emma's pregnancy progressed, and we found a nice 4-bedroom house near my brother's place, which was perfect for raising children. Marcy and Emma got stuck into decorating and planning for our expanding family. Emma, Maria Fisher Walters, gave birth to beautiful twin girls, each weighing almost 6 pounds. Our lives became a whirlwind of feeding, changing nappies, and sleepless nights. Maria and my mom were competing to be the best grandma, while my dad and Carl were vying to outdo each other in home renovations. They had grand plans for our house, and I decided to let them run with it. It was a bit of a rough patch, but something good came out of it. I lost my first wife because of her infidelity, which she hid from me for a long time, which led to the end of our marriage. I felt guilty, but she chose to cheat. Meeting Emma was a chance encounter. If I hadn't gotten a flat tire in Newfoundland while eating ice cream, I probably never would have met her. Meeting her was the best thing that could have happened to me. Now I have a new life, a wonderful wife, 2 children, and a future to look forward to. This is the life I wanted. Later on, David and I went back to Berlin by train. I had a lot on my plate and wanted him to be there with me at my ultrasound appointment. He spent some time on the phone with his hospital and his family to share the news. His parents were shouting over the noise of his brother, his wife, and their children. I heard phrases like, "David is getting married to that German girl from Africa." They were really happy about our engagement and especially that I was pregnant. I told the publisher I would take a break from work but stay on as a consultant on the book and videos. At the ultrasound, we got some surprising news. The doctor used a wand to find the heartbeat. David watched the monitor and I saw a smile on his face, which meant everything was fine. The doctor made some buzzing sounds and let us hear the heartbeat, but then I heard David say, "Oh wow," which surprised me. The machine made rapid heartbeat sounds. David looked at me, and I knew we were having twins. The doctor smiled, and I cried. I got the last word shortly after moving to America. I was shopping for children's furniture at IKEA with my sister. In-law Marcy was looking at Marcy and clearly recognizing her. Marcy turned and spoke to her, saying, "Hi, Diane." That was it, no pleasantries. I knew who Diane was, but I'd never seen her before. She was David's ex. Marcy introduced me to Diane, who had an affair with David until he found out. "Hey Marcy, how's it going?" Diane said, turning to show her very pregnant belly. I already knew this, but it was useful to hear it from her point of view. David's family never talked about Diane, she was old news. Forgotten by the time David came home, we made love. Being with him always has the same effect. I dreamed of us riding motorcycles and traveling. While that might not happen soon, David's parents offered their motor home for trips with the little ones. The motorcycles might gather dust for now, but I'll think about it. It could be fun.